Our next session is going to zero in yet again on today's mobile sports fan and specifically creating engaging and interactive programming across the entire fan experience. So I want to thank our friends at Flowcode for their support of Convergent TV this week and for their help in bringing this next session and this very special guest to us. So let's please welcome Jim Norton, Chief Revenue Officer of Flowcode, and Fred Gaudelli, the executive producer of NBC's Sunday Night Football, as they take a look at the evolution of sports programming over the past 20 years and what the future of fan engagement will look like. So welcome, Jim and Fred.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Delighted to be joined by Fred Gaudelli. For those of you that don't know Fred, an absolute legend in sports broadcasting in general, spent the last, 14 years at NBC Sports. 16. Long career at ESPN as well. Coming off this year's Super Bowl, I think the second most watched television program in history,
Yeah, I think it was in the top. It might have been third. I know we had the first one back for your Patriot game back in.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Seattle. So I'm delighted to have Fred join us just to talk about innovation in sports programming. My name is Jim Norton. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of Flowcode. Flowcode is a next-generation QR technology platform. We're working with brands and broadcasters on helping them connect offline, linear consumer and fan engagements with digital experiences. We're fortunate to have a long-standing partnership with NBC, which includes NBC Sports. We did this past year's both Winter Olympic Games as well as Summer Games, which allowed viewers and fans to connect directly to those digital experiences through the Flowcode technology. But we're here to talk with Fred just really about the innovation in sports in general. And we're on the cusp of the NFL draft, which kicks off tonight. One of the things that Fred and I have talked about is how certainly the National Football League, and this is the aspiration of other leagues, about being a 52-week year sport. So would love to just get some insight from you, Fred, on what the NFL looks like today as we're on the cusp of the draft. And let's talk maybe a little preview for next season.
Yeah, well, I worked a lot of drafts when I was at ESPN. The first one was in 1983. Down a little bit on 7th Avenue at the Sheraton. We started 8 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, and we went to 6 p.m. and signed off. And I think we were through at that point, maybe 2 rounds. And what you're going to see tonight is going to be an extravaganza like none other.
Yeah.
The TV ratings for this go up every single year. And I think, when you look at Roger Goodell and his tenure as the commissioner, he's made the NFL relevant almost 52 weeks a year. And I know that's his goal to get to that point. The NFL is the most powerful entertainment entity, probably in the world. You probably maybe World Cup soccer and some of that, but certainly in the United States, there's nothing else like it, from the revenue they generate, from the audiences that they generate, from, what the networks pay, to put on NFL football games. It's blue sky ahead for the NFL, it looks like.
Well, and interesting for your role too, because it's no longer just about the broadcast, right? It's no longer about those 3 hours from kickoff to the final whistle. How are you and the team thinking about, both that pre-game, post-game, and the week in between games of enhancing that fan experience beyond just what happens during the broadcast itself?
Well, the whole digital side of this and the streaming side of this is we've seen, a lot of networks take advantage of that. I know on Peacock, we did a full, 1 hour post-game show that wrapped up the entire Sunday. And it was live both from our studios and at the game, that we had just completed. We've seen a lot of these alternate broadcasts, whether it be the Manning Cast on ESPN and other things like that. So you're trying to bring as many people into the tent and try to have as many different, experiential preferences, so to speak, that, I like it this way, I like it traditionally, I'm just going to watch it on TV. But you're trying to give them as many choices and options not to leave, what you're putting out there.
Yeah. And then in your role as well, it doesn't stop with the broadcast during the game, because there's a lot of in-stadium experience that, as far as, if you think about what is it that can be used in social, right? We know it's a second screen viewing audience usually during the game as well.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just talk a little bit about, the kind of the role of omnichannel, if you will, whether that's the linear broadcast, the stream, the social media, and how does your team try to create a product that is truly omnichannel across those?
Yeah, and that's the challenge, because obviously one of the goals, I remember when I first got into television, and Don Ohlmeyer was a legendary producer, and I got to work with Dick Ebersol. They're kind of like two-thirds of the holy trinity of sports television. Yeah. Roone Arledge is the first.
Yeah.
But, it was always, hey, let's take the viewer somewhere they can't go. Mm-hmm. So that means, taking them inside. Yep. Or giving them the experience of being in the stadium. So there's always that aspect of it. Then now, when the advent of social media, there's usually a lot of conversation going on about the Sunday night game. Okay, well, what's relevant? What's something that we can bring into that telecast to kind of address those people that are enjoying the game that way and talking about it? So you're looking for that encompassing experience, and a lot of these stadiums now are technological marvels. I mean, SoFi Stadium, where we just did the Super Bowl, AT&T Stadium, even though it's now, 13 years old, about to be 13 years old, it's still a technological marvel. So you want to give people that experience of being in here at this time. And a lot of planning goes on with the in-house entertainment team to try to take advantage of what they're doing.
Yeah, so you're very conscious of it's not just the broadcast, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have a 30-minute meeting each week, and every team is different. The Cowboys and the Rams, they're all in on the entertainment. Some teams are a little bit more conservative, but regardless, every team has its own traditions. Yeah. Every team has its own little, idiosyncrasies in terms of, what they do for their fans in the stadium. And you want to try to bring that home to the rest of the country.
Yeah. Innovation has been core to your career. For those of you that don't know, Fred and his team were the first ones to implement the 1st and 10 marker that you see on the screen, the yellow line, goalpost cam, sky cam.
Right.
Would love to hear about how you guys think about innovation, where that comes from.
Right.
And what are some of the things that as you look out this season, next few seasons, as far as innovation goes?
Well, to answer the first question, we get pitched a lot of different technology all the time. When you're doing shows like Sunday Night Football or Monday Night Football, the ideas come to you.
Yeah.
It's really a pretty simple calculus for me. Does it make the broadcast more fun? Does it make it more understandable, like the yellow line? Does it add to the viewing experience? If it can answer like 2 of those 3 things, it's worth having. If it's just cool but doesn't, really affect the broadcast in a positive way, then it's probably not worth having. So that's kind of always been my MO. And that's how I evaluate technology when it comes to me. But the great thing about, when I first went to Monday night and now being at Sunday night, moving over to Thursday night, I became like a football specialist. Mm-hmm. So once football ended, took a little break and then started planning the next year. So you have 4 or 5 months to put your team back together and really think about innovation and, what would be something that the audience is really going to plug into. And we're kind of in that stage right now. I'm going to be doing the Amazon broadcast this year, which is going to be the first time streaming. The NFL is exclusively on streaming. Mm-hmm. So really trying to take advantage of what that platform brings to the viewer. And I'll be honest with you, up until this point, I wasn't like the biggest streaming expert. So I'm really trying to figure out, hey, what is it about this platform that technologically may bring some added value to the viewer? And I'm sure it's out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. I mean, we know Amazon's enormous investment, right, in NFL rights.
Right.
I think a testament to you and your team that they're subbing out that production to you. That is your production now, right?
NBC's, yes.
Yeah, right. streaming as a challenge for live sports, right? You to talk a little bit about things like latency and
Well, I'll give you. I mean, streaming is a challenge because if you're not in a certain age group, finding it isn't as easy as if you're in if you're a young person.
right.
So Amazon had its first Yankee telecast last Friday. Turn Amazon on my television. Oh, I'm blacked out. Now I turn it on my phone and I turn it on my iPad and it's there. So I'm watching it on both. I'm watching it on my iPad and my phone. So I think the first thing is going to be awareness and how do I find this, especially for people that are not technological or computer savvy, per se. Right. So that's going to be, I think, one of the first hurdles that we have to get over. I think the second hurdle is a lot of sports fans are used to in commercials, or just changing the channel. I think, as everybody knows who watches programming on streaming services, getting in and out of a stream, not like changing a channel. And once you leave, are you apt to go back in and go through the process of picking up where you just left off? So I think, hopefully technology as it advances is going to make that better and solve that issue. But it's an issue to start, I believe. I
mean, historically, streaming has always had some built-in latency, right?
Right.
How do you manage that when, you're one tweet away from knowing the play before you see it?
Yeah. I mean, that's where technology is going to really have to come to the fore and solve that issue. And, if you talk about live sports gambling and, where we might be headed with that, that's even, that's a big, financial proposition for everyone.
Yeah.
So I would imagine there'll be some money put toward trying to solve those latency issues.
Yeah. I mean, you bring up a great topic, which is legal sports betting. I think we're up to 24 states right now that have legalized sports betting. We know you don't have to watch a broadcast very long to see the money being invested by DraftKings and FanDuel and Caesars and others. And kind of crazy to know where we were.
Right. Well, the fact that we have a draft in Las Vegas.
That's
tonight,
right.
I mean,
never mind a team, the actual draft.
Right. Didn't see that coming.
Right. Yeah. Right. I mean, that was taboo for decades, right?
Major taboo. Like there was no larger taboo than gambling. Right.
Right. How do you think about that as part of the broadcast? I mean, this is, it's become such a part of the viewing experience, even if it's just fantasy, right? I mean, how do you weave that in, knowing that, you've got half the states that cannot participate?
Well, the leagues are really going to have to lead the way on that.
Yeah.
How much they're going to allow you. I think right now the NFL has a rule like 10 minutes before the game, there can be no DraftKings commercial or FanDuel commercial.
Okay.
You can't be giving lines and props and things of that nature. But I would expect that 10-minute is going to, begin to shrink. And at some point, I can't tell you when, you'll probably have things inside the game like, because look, even analytics is tied into that fantasy a little bit because you can project or predict, hey, Cooper Kupp in this particular game,
right?
We're going to set his numbers at, 7 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown. And you'll be able to bet whether he makes, makes the number, exceeds the number, or doesn't make the number. So, there's
that really does have to be led by the leagues, right?
Yeah, because they're going to have to be comfortable. And look, we've seen 2 players in the last 2 years suspended, for betting.
Yeah.
So it might be a little bit slower process than the business world would like.
Yeah, certainly at Flowcode in our relationship with the NFL as well as the other major sports leagues, that has been it's an enormous topic. One of the first activations that Flowcode actually did with the NFL was their free-to-play offering. And it's just, how do you begin to test fan engagement in a gaming environment, whether it's a paid or free-to-play environment? So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, and we've had a free-to-play game, the last 3 years on Sunday Night Football,
right?
With a pretty great payout. It's $100,000. If you're able to win, and obviously there's usually multiple winners because you're not you're not making that many quote bets on the game itself. But again, I think it's everybody dipping their toe in and seeing how comfortable they can get with the temperature.
Yeah. Well, it's coming regardless,
It's
right?
coming,
It's already out there.
Right.
So, shifting gears a little bit to two-way fan interaction with the game, and you and your team have done some things like real-time polling during a game, whether it might be when a play is under review and things of that nature. One of the things that we're doing at Flowcode is really trying to allow, in a very seamless, friction-free way, for the fan at home to scan a code directly on the screen and engage with the programming. Talk a little bit about how you guys think about that two-way fan engagement at home and even in stadium, for that matter.
Well, I mean, look, the goal is higher ratings, right?
Yeah.
And you would think it's more people, but it's actually people watching longer. If you can get people to watch 5 minutes longer, literally 5 minutes longer, that's really going to enhance your rating. Right? Yeah, it makes a huge rating. So, again, we live in a world of complete distraction, right? I mean, there's a million things going on while you're watching whatever it is that you're watching. So whatever you can do to try to keep these people engaged, and you do need to think about keeping people engaged for all the reasons I just said, it's an important part of our innovation. It's an important part of our planning. In the stadium, again, I mean, I remember, producing games in the 90s, when there was an organ player and, the organ player played charge and the crowd went charge and they did the wave and, that was your fan engagement. And you go to any sporting event now. I mean, there is, from the time the ball is dead till the time the ball comes back into play, there's complete engagement, and they've got, entire departments dedicated on keeping their fans engaged during the game, for all the reasons we're talking about right here.
Yeah. I mean, 5 minutes makes a big difference, right? 5 added minutes of engagement.
Five added minutes of engagement probably increases your rating by 5 to 10%.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mobile. There's probably not a viewer either at home or in stadium that does not have their device on them.
Right.
How do you and the team think about that mobile experience during a broadcast? And in some cases, people are viewing the broadcast on mobile, while in other cases, they're using it to check stat lines or check other scores. And how do you, and certainly how does the talent team work with that too? You're trying to engage in a broadcast. So,
well, I'll tell you, just getting ready for this Thursday night. So, we're creating an entire graphic look and, what the whole thing is going to be. And a lot of my viewing right now is on a phone to see if it translates on a phone. Can I read this holding my phone up? Is it too small? Does it need to be larger?
Yeah.
Is it vibrant enough? Because it's not a 60-inch Samsung in my living room. It's my 3-inch iPhone.
Right.
So all our graphics, especially for a streaming service where a lot of this consumption is going to be on devices, not a television, it's getting major consideration, and every element that we produce. Is this going to translate meaningfully on a device? Yeah, like a phone.
And during the game, are you getting engagement signals in any way from the audience? And and how do you think about that long term, in terms of being able to optimize the broadcast based off of what fans might be doing at home or in stadium?
Well, I mean, for the last 10 years, I have somebody who sits in the truck right behind me, and one of their major functions is to monitor social media.
Yep.
And what's being said about what we're doing.
Yep.
So, we had we were fortunate enough, we did the game here in New York when Odell Beckham Jr. made that ridiculous catch that,
right.
The catch heard around the world. And, Jordan tweeted in, LeBron tweeted in, Shaquille O'Neal, all these people are starting to tweet in. And, hey, that's part of the viewing experience. Now we're trying to get those on the air. Sometimes, I just did the Super Bowl, and there was the first play of the second half was a touchdown, but Jalen Ramsey it should have been offensive pass interference.
That's right.
I mean, that was being talked about. So we kept bringing that play back because people were talking about it. So it definitely influences some of the decision-making, especially if it's a huge topic of conversation on social media.
Yeah. I mean, again, one of the things with Flowcode, trying to bring in that real-time fan engagement analytics, allow certainly content teams to optimize content, and then even for advertisers, for them to get a signal in real time, right? one of the things you and I talked about last week was, historically, maybe you'd meet with the sales team once a year. Right. We're at the Adweek conference. I'm sure there's a lot of media sales folks either here in the audience or at home viewing. Talk a little bit about how that's evolved. It used to be church and state between the content production teams and the business teams. Yeah. No, that's not the case any longer, right?
Well, no. I mean, obviously, we're all fighting for every dollar, right? Yeah. And you want your sponsors to feel like Sunday Night Football has the most expensive commercial on television. Yeah. So we want our sponsors to feel like they're getting great value, for being part of Sunday Night Football. So, if someone's going to come in, and whether they're sponsoring the Carrie Underwood Open, whether they're sponsoring, not because I'm doing Amazon now, but, Amazon World Web Services has been a big sponsor with the Next Gen Stats. So you want to make sure that, they're happy with how you're executing. And in terms of the church and state thing, I know at NBC it's been great. To me, if it adds to the broadcast, if it's something that I would want to do, whether it was sponsored or not, well, let's go ahead and sponsor it if we can sponsor it, and try to make a few more bucks on it. So but yeah, I mean I honestly think it's been better. The working together, the two departments, I think has made both departments better.
I'm sure you're still asked to do some very unnatural things with an advertiser on occasion where it's like, it's probably not going to make a whole lot of sense, right?
Yeah, and the good thing is the NFL has some very stringent rules on what you can and cannot, sponsor. So that takes some of the burden. That takes some of the burden off the broadcaster.
It's great. Would love to get a little inside football. Lots of movement on the talent side, and certainly Mike Tarico.
Right.
That's big news. Obviously, Al Michaels' move. Yep. Can you give a little bit of inside talent on what's happening on the broadcast teams and what you're seeing?
Well, I mean, for me, it's a win-win because Mike Tarico is somebody that I've known since the '80s. We've worked together since the late '80s, an experienced play-by-play broadcaster, a tremendous host. His work at the Olympics and the Super Bowl pregame and halftime and postgame this year. And it feels like the right time for Mike now to kind of move into this role. And then for me, I've had the opportunity to work with Al, for the last 21 seasons. And obviously I have a bias here, but, probably the greatest play-by-play announcer that there's ever been. And now he comes over to Amazon, brings instant credibility to what we're trying to do on Thursday Night Football. He and I keep our relationship going. So it was a very, very strange offseason with all the movement and some of the salaries that got handed out here.
Crazy.
But again, I think that speaks to the power of the NFL and how important it is, not only for the viewers, but the networks that have the product.
Does the Chris Collinsworth slide-in still work in this?
I would imagine the Chris Collinsworth slide-in is still going to work. We just got to figure out how we're going to bring Kirk Herbstreit in now.
That's right.
We can't slide him in.
Yeah. Great addition to the broadcast team. Well, Fred, thank you. I do want to open it up for questions here in the audience. There's a couple of virtual questions that have come in, but before we go to that, let's just see if we've got any folks here that have a question for Fred. Looks like we got one in the back.
Hi. Thanks. Very interesting conversation. I'm curious about your opinion on how cluttered and busy the broadcasts have become. You think about what you were talking about with the Manning cast and ESPN talking heads during the action. Apple's now incorporating predictability statistics in baseball. What are your thoughts on that evolution?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Look, I still think the largest part of the audience wants to watch the game. If you look at the ratings on Monday night, and I think the Mannings are pretty consistently at about 1.5 million to 2 million people, and the game is anywhere from 10 to 12 million people, depending on the matchup. I like turning over to the Manning cast for a while. I mean, obviously, I've gotten to know Peyton and Eli over the years. I think they're really entertaining and know a ton about football. But if I really want to watch the game, I'm probably going to watch this year Joe and Troy, because it's hard to watch the game, while the Manning cast is going on. I think there's some maybe other type of events. I know in the women's championship game, ESPN had Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi And I don't get to watch a lot of women's college basketball during the season, but I happened to turn that on first, and I never left it because they were widely entertaining to me. But I think it's a fine balance, because if you can't watch the game and that's what you're tuning in for, you're probably going to tune out. But for the other people who are looking for a different experience, who maybe aren't really devoted to what's happening on the field, but are really kind of, intrigued by the people that are, talking on this alternate telecast, again, for ESPN, that's hopefully incremental viewership, right? I mean, so you got your 10 or 12 million on ESPN, and then if you're adding 1.5 million to 2 million on ESPN2, you're selling your commercials at a different rate.
I mean, it goes back to what you said, right? I mean, and that's the equivalent of that extra 5 minutes of engagement, potential 10% ratings increase, an added million viewers on top of an existing 11. There's another close to 10% audience that you can sell, right?
Yeah, and I think, look, I'm passionate about football. I'm passionate about baseball. There's certain other sports where I'm maybe less passionate about but interested in. And that alternate telecast might appeal to me in the sports that I'm not as heavily, engrossed in. And, it probably works that way for a lot of other sports fans too.
Yeah. Other questions here, Andrew?
Can you shed some light on the economic relationship between commentators and the ultimate output of the telecast? So, for example, ESPN paying 3x what their previous booth might have cost. Can they realize that outside of the broadcast, or is it a brand play?
I think it's purely a brand play because, and this is, I don't care who your announcer is, maybe other than a guy like John Madden, no one is tuning in for the announcers. If you're tuning in for the game.
Right.
So, so for the ESPN side, I think that they know they've got a Super Bowl coming, I believe, in 2027. And they wanted to have a Super Bowl worthy announce team, which they certainly have right now with Joe Buck and Troy Aikman. Conversely, I think if you're Fox, that Kevin Burkhardt is an excellent announcer. It appears that Greg Olson is going to be pretty good and entertaining as well. You're not going to lose one viewer because Joe and Troy aren't there anymore. So they made a different decision. I think it really comes down to the, who's running the shop and, where they feel the importance lies. It'll be interesting to see. I don't think, like I said, Monday night may get better games because they have, Joe and Troy. Fox isn't going to get less good games. They're going to get the same games they've always gotten. So, to answer your question, I think it's a pure brand play and a really kind of a management strategy on how they want to spend their money.
Yeah, and big money at stake.
And big money at stake.
Big money at stake, right? So, Fred, then again, thank you. I just want to summarize just some key takeaways here that I think we heard. I think certainly innovation remains at the forefront, right? And you absolutely have to continue to innovate the broadcast, and that's not just the home viewing experience, it's the overall fan viewing experience, number one. Streaming platforms, this is not a one-time test, right?
No.
This is the future, right? And I think that, one of the things that we'd love to talk about next time perhaps is, the personalized experience that a streaming platform could potentially deliver. And then the third one is LSB and legal sports betting, right? It's just like that the gaming element of this, to drive interactivity, to drive engagement, back to that, that line that you had, and that extra 5 minutes of engagement, that means a big difference. So, and any final thoughts from you at all, Fred?
No, I think it's a really interesting time for innovation and for program innovation and even for production, because there's still, tens of millions of people who view sports very sacredly and don't want their sports, tinkered with too much. But then there's a lot of other people that are looking to be entertained beyond what the game brings. So I think it's going to be the people that can do both on probably different services, but under one brand, that are going to be successful.
Prediction for NFL next year. I won't give you, it's not Super Bowl, but let's go AFC and NFC. What do you got?
Well, it'll be interesting to see what the Chiefs get without, Tyreek Hill. But the AFC is loaded, and specifically the AFC West, where you have Mahomes, Herbert, Russell Wilson, Derek Carr with McDaniels in there now. So I think the AFC right now is a more attractive conference than the NFC. And then in the NFC, it's like, hey, is Green Bay ever going to get over this hump? Yeah. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, for all his greatness, he's been to one Super Bowl. He's lost a couple of home playoff games. So I think a lot of interest on what happens with Green Bay this year.
We will tune in.
All right.
All right, Fred. Thank you very much. And thanks to everybody here.